Right now we have a panel navigating regulation for blockchain implementation and development. It'll be moderated by Michael Turpin. Your panelists will be Giovanni Mendez from the Global Economic Optimization, GEO, and Harris Tolchin, attorney at Harris Tolchin and Associates. Brad Usar was supposed to be joining us, but he had to jump on a call. So
should we move down to this side of the?
Yeah, however you guys want to sit.
Well, I was going to say, because your camera angle, or did you fix that?
It's fixed.
Okay, good.
How?
So that's the only logistical issue we had all the time, and we're good, right? Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about regulation. We usually put the regulation panel last because it makes people stay around for the most part, but I think with a beautiful day in Monaco, some people are probably already out having their first cocktail. Or third.
So they had them at lunch too, right?
It's France, so
the ones wine at lunch didn't count.
Yeah, wine at lunch doesn't count as France. So, so we're going to talk just a little bit, kind of free for all about jurisdictions, about regulation, and all of its myriad forms, and then just kind of have a little time to open it up to audience for any questions that they might have. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't even play one on TV, but I've employed a lot of lawyers. I try to find the best and the brightest, and I also am friends with a lot of lawyers, because that way I'll go and get their opinions. When my lawyers tell me something, I'll have somebody who I'm not paying give me their opinion, and if their opinion ends up being what I consider the right one, next time I hire them. And then I ask the other one what they think. So, I mean, over the years, I've probably gained 30 or 40 lawyers in different jurisdictions and disciplines in terms of people I've paid, people who are my friends, and both. And yes, I have lawyers as friends. Wow. Okay.
It's good to be Mike's friend, right?
And so crypto obviously is an area that has been, a bigger source of concern for doing things right legally than, say, the internet. I mean, not that you can't do things wrong on the internet, but when you're involved with things that could be seen as money, and pretty much all fungible currencies have that aspect, and even though when you have any kind of security like a startup stock, I mean, you are effectively printing a form of currency in the sense that, Facebook stock, if you got it in the early days, you became pretty wealthy on it. And but it's not something you could go in before it got publicly listed and go and buy a cup of coffee with it. Whereas arguably Bitcoin and Ethereum, you can. So obviously this has been a great threat to many governments. It's also been something in more recent years that governments have embraced, particularly in the third world like El Salvador. So we're going to talk a little bit about just jurisdictions in general. What jurisdictions do we think are friendly, as they say? When I first started BitAngel with David Johnston, we had 7 areas that we were trying to cover, and one of them was friendly jurisdictions. Let's find out which places are going to be safe for Bitcoin companies and eventually crypto companies to reside in. Typically, if you're just offering equity, the United States is just fine. If you're doing something where you're actually selling a fungible token, that makes it a much trickier proposition. And sometimes even if you go to another jurisdiction but you're an American team, that's tricky too. So there's all sorts of variations just from the securities side. But since we don't have a securities lawyer on the panel here, we've got a tax lawyer and an entertainment lawyer. We're going to talk about some other areas, including IP and jurisdictions and people traveling with their feet. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists, and they can talk a little bit about their area of expertise and sort of how it's fit in with crypto. Giovanni.
Good afternoon. My name is Giovanni Mendez. I am a tax attorney in Puerto Rico. So my area of expertise is taxes, particularly the tax incentive code in Puerto Rico, and that also requires an understanding of the interplay with the U.S. tax code. Although many of my clients, do still retain a U.S. tax advisor, we definitely need to understand, how it all fits in. And I've, through the years, gathered many crypto clients. It's become a powerful niche in my business. Michael being the first, actually before I had my own firm. And the evolution in the work in the crypto space, has allowed me to grow this office and whatnot. We do other work besides taxes, but it mostly is that. Normally, we help clients identify when they need someone else that's not us, because a lot of clients come in with all the legal questions at once, and that goes into the securities or the IP. And I'm like, well, I know someone, and that's part of the regulatory process. Sometimes clients don't understand that. A good thing that Michael said is he asks different lawyers in different fields. Sometimes people don't understand that, and that's a general business sense, right? That you need to have all those experts. In any case, here to fill part of that gap.
I guess I'll ask one question too. Puerto Rico, I was the first person to move there from the crypto world in early 2016, before there was even Uber like Monaco. Hopefully that changes by next year. What's the latest count? How many people do we think are there either under Act 20 or 22? 500? For crypto related.
Crypto related. Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. Net 500. People have come and gone, with markets and companies and tokens. So in 1 year you get a few hundred, but then only a portion of that survive. But yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Which, if you look at it, industry-wise, it's probably the strongest industry within all the incentive, because there's maybe 3,000 active participants in the program, and if you have close to 20% that are just crypto, it's probably the strongest.
Kind of tie with investment banking.
I would say that investment banking was initially a lot of them, but but aside from your day traders, if you exclude day traders that don't actually run a business, I don't think hedge funds is close to the biggest any longer. Probably mass tort firms, attorneys, and affiliate marketing and e-commerce. Yeah.
So I think
in Dorado, but go on.
I think it's important to just point out that if you're an American, you live in Puerto Rico, there's no federal taxes, only state.
Yeah, I'm
tax
sure we're going to get into that, but yes, Puerto Rico not being incorporated as a state doesn't have a congressional representation with vote, doesn't have delegates for president, so based on the very basic principle that the country is founded on, no taxation without representation, U.S. citizens that live in Puerto Rico do not pay federal income tax on the income that's sourced to Puerto Rico. That's sort of what starts everything from the federal perspective, and then Puerto Rico becomes its autonomous taxing authority and chooses what taxes to implement or not, and as part of that has through decades had incentive programs, and since 2012 it incorporated an individual investor incentive program, which is mainly the difference. The Export Service Act existed since the 70s in some sort of form. But an individual incentive never existed before 2012, so that's where you get no tax on capital gains or 4% tax on the exportation of services. And you said U.S. citizen, but also if you're a legal immigrant, a green card holder, or have a visa, you could also your path to citizenship could be Puerto Rico, and it will be a less expensive path to citizenship because you wouldn't be taxed, worldwide, but it'd be taxed Puerto Rico. And if you become a citizen and are naturalized through a connection in Puerto Rico, U.S. estate tax rules don't apply. So that can be very, very powerful for estate planning in general, for someone that's either intending to become a citizen.
And one of the things I know that you do, other than just tax planning around the acts, is also working with opportunity zones. And so there's a lot of people who will go and invest their capital gains that were sourced in the mainland into opportunity zones. And it'll also be people who are European or Asian. I know Asia's been the biggest part of it in recent years. Will go and invest, typically in a real estate project in the United States, and for $1 million, they can basically buy themselves a citizenship through a real estate project. Or if it's in a considered distressed economic area, it would be $500,000.
Yep.
All of Puerto Rico, except for like Dorado and Miramar and Condado, are considered.
Yeah, so
distressed.
the EB-5 program, again, in the path through citizenship, yes, it's less expensive to do through Puerto Rico. There are a few opportunity zone projects. There have been several EB-5 programs, but definitely there's space for more. The construction of the Four Seasons in the east of the island was an EB-5 program. They were running on EB-5 funding, but then kind of got interrupted and shifted into other things, so now they're doing some private funding. But yes, Puerto Rico is definitely, Terra Island, it's
Is that going to get built?
Well, they restarted again now. It's they're on the third attempt.
Fajardo?
Yes, it's in Fajardo. They tore down the main building that we're doing, and now it's villas. So the villas are being built right now, so it's a little different concept. But since Marina Puerto del Rey is getting its expansion under the new ownership, it will connect. So I think that's new wind into that project.
Harris, tell us about some of the areas of IP that you find interesting in the sort of intersection between entertainment law, NFTs, and this industry here overall.
So what I do generally is I'm involved in all phases of development, financing, production, distribution of movies, television, music, and NFTs now. I'm working with Ali, who's taking pictures over there right now. And he was one of the earlier speakers. And I have a movie that I was an executive producer of recently called The Comeback Trail. And it's a comedy, and it has Robert De Niro, Tommy Lee Jones, and Morgan Freeman in it. And Ali was very interested in this movie, and we structured a deal together where Ali has a platform where he can, and it's registered with the SEC, it's called untold.io. And we structured a deal where we had a senior debt for the movie, a senior debt of a very wealthy investor out of Canada who provided his senior debt to Ali's platform. And I think you're going to go live pretty soon?
Yes.
When are you going live?
Looks like we're filing SEC next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
And so you will start to sell
Yes.
pieces, little pieces of the senior debt, and hopefully my client will be paid back very soon instead of having to wait for equity. So we're very excited about that. Another one, we do a lot of different things. Another one is a TV series. It's a 10-part TV series. And it is about the crypto business. And it's actually going to be shot in Puerto Rico.
And tax credits for entertainment too.
Yeah, there are going to be tax credits, of course. And it's called Hold On for Dear Life. And actually, Rob Weiss is the executive producer who created Entourage and Ballers. So that project, we have a registered broker dealer who will be selling pieces of net profit participations in the show as well as NFTs in the show, and that's already happening right now. So those are a couple of things we're working on right now. We do a lot in Puerto Rico, so we should know each other.
No, Puerto Rico has a real good tax credit program, and the market is very liquid for them. Because I think those are the two things. One is you get the credit, two is you could actually sell them 93 cents plus on the dollar is pretty liquid. And I think another interesting thing is, there's an intersection here. If you create IP within the US and then you become Google or Facebook and you want to move out, you have to pay huge exit tax, right? And these companies do because they're better off operating, somewhere. But if you create IP within Puerto Rico, you're protected by US IP laws, but you're not subject to US, tax on or super royalty provisions. If you, one is either just operate out of Puerto Rico and pay the 4% tax, but move out. So that's a very interesting, place where these things come together. Is like, you have clients, you probably want them to develop IP within Puerto Rico. And I tell clients sometimes, very early on, it's like, no, early is a good, don't just move to Puerto Rico once it's built. Puerto Rico is a very good location or opportunity to build.
Come and build it there.
Come and build it here, because you don't have a tax problem now, but you're eventually if you're profitable, you will have just general income tax problem. Plus, a lot of companies, tech companies, software companies, or companies in general that deal with trademarks, patents, etc. That they don't think about that, and the big examples and famous ones are Facebook, because then the IRS is fighting with them for years on, your valuation was wrong, right? But, if you would have built outside of Puerto Rico, then you'd never had that problem.
Meanwhile, Microsoft came down many years ago and has saved a boatload of money.
Yeah, Microsoft came down in the 90s, and they've had an interesting evolution. They have the entire Microsoft Office product for the Americas is distributed out of Puerto Rico, and at one point it was manufacturing, right? So they would bring in the discs for the CDs. They burned the disc in Puerto Rico, and the burning the disc was a manufacturing process, so they paid 4% tax on that.
But nothing to the IRS.
Yeah.
And didn't they get some subsidies for coming down there too?
Well, they constantly got, there's incentives for property, plant, and equipment, and there's on-the-job training where you get, you hear numbers that are like up to 95%, but you get like 50, 60% of salaries returned for 6 months. And if you grow, you could do that again and again and again. So there's constant incentives. But then, with the technological evolution, they stopped burning disks, and they became a software as a service platform. So then they were exporting the service. So you're downloading your Microsoft Office and updates, from the Puerto Rico plant or branch, and it continued to help in the sourcing. They're leaving Puerto Rico now, unfortunately. They are, yeah.
Why?
I think it's the business model change in general, but they're leaving, and granted, for the 2017 Jobs Act, if you're a publicly traded company, it sort of shifts the interest you might have in, for example, Puerto Rico, especially if you don't have. It was designed for pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals have massive, property, plant, and equipment, so they don't get a hit under something called the GILTI tax. But Microsoft Office, again, it's a software as a service platform in a publicly traded company. I don't think they're better off necessarily, and then particularly they have the same thing in Hong Kong and in Ireland, so they can consolidate.
They probably went to Ireland, right?
They're probably going to consolidate into one of the three. Their company annual report would say we have massive tax savings because, these aren't the words, but it would say, this is considering our tax savings because of our operations in Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, and Ireland, right? So they'll probably just consolidate into one of the three.
Okay. Questions from the audience? On IP, on taxes?
I do have some, but maybe for later. Like for European citizens, it is like sort of the same path for like any other country to set up and apply there because our company is located in different places in the world, right? And we were looking at Puerto Rico as an option, of course, with Michael. And he's mentioned Puerto Rico all these years. But I'm either Argentinian or Italian. We live in Barcelona, so a little bit of a mess. And thinking about Puerto Rico, thinking about Puerto Rico for the future, and even for our company operations for the U.S. and Central America, how hard and easy it is for like completely non-U.S. citizens for being in Puerto Rico.
Well, there's two aspects to that question. I think one is from the company perspective, and another is from the individual.
Correct.
So for the individual, it's the U.S. immigration route.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, so it's the same.
Okay.
With again, EB-5 is lower, and you could justify, like, if you're hiring employees, so your E or your L visas, they may be easier, right? Because it's hard to recruit, and Puerto Rico is an impoverished location. So that's procedure-wise, it could be easier. Company-wise, well, there's no residency requirement for the company itself. So you could establish, the company in Puerto Rico and recruit locally, or use that same company for your E or L visas. And there's no additional burden. So it's a very good way to, obviously near shore, right? You're going to be on East Coast time zone for most of the year, within a U.S. jurisdiction that has U.S. IP laws and a federal district court, without paying 37-40% tax. So it's a very interesting way for foreign companies, right, in general, to, if you have...
usually go to Delaware, right?
Well, yeah, but you go to Delaware because you save state tax, but then you're paying federal.
Right, exactly.
Right?
That's exactly what I was about.
Versus Puerto Rico,
exactly.
So if you pay 4%, you get all the protections of, and that's something that is very interesting for foreign companies, because you have that a lot, and sometimes you have systems where, like, no, I'm going to do an offshore feeder because my investors don't want to be tainted into the U.S., et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
You set up in Puerto Rico, you don't need a foreign feeder because it's, again, you're in a separate tax system. So at least the tax system is segregated, but again, you're within the U.S. market. So it is an opportunity. And then you mentioned, Argentina. So you're in a bridge with South America now, and Spanish speaking, and you'll find even some people that parla Italiano. So.
Yeah. So it depends on what kind of IP you want to create. I know that, as you know, if you're making movies and television, there are big subsidies for coming in there and shooting, and if you can't do post-production.
Their gaming studio.
Yeah. What about games? Any specifics on gaming? No.
Yeah. So gaming. So the incentives for the film industry apply to games.
Oh,
so you get the
interesting.
50% tax credit for creative industries. So developing games, and then
What about token launch? Because I want the whole package now.
Well,
token launch is U.S. law, right? So,
Well, from a tax perspective, we've gotten like decrees approved where the token launch, and then this is the discussion about utility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
But assuming you check those boxes, it's
Right.
4% tax. So the sale of the token will fit into the 4% tax as well, right?
You include it in the whole IP package that you're creating, right?
Well, I don't do the IP part, but yeah, yes, we do. Wink, wink, yes.
We're going to work together.
Absolutely, love to.
As a Puerto Rico company, particularly with a global theater, you and I have collaborated on this for a couple of companies that I've worked with. You could go in and do the token sale in a non-U.S. jurisdiction, block U.S., and then go and, if you wish to, have it basically running the revenue and having it go through your Puerto Rico company to 4%. So that way you don't have any of the, most of the regulatory is on initial sale. Once you're actually going in and having it be a DAO or having it be, having it be team tokens or treasury tokens for the for the C corp, and there's several different complex variations of it. But the 4% rule, basically, as long as you're not doing anything to upset the securities lawyers, which usually has to do with initial sale, the taxation is just fits under the 4% of software as a service.
Yeah, the taxation part is correct.
Awesome. So we could launch out of BVI and then just move operate from Puerto Rico, basically.
Yeah, that's I've seen projects that end up doing something like that, and there's advantage to the proximity as well.
60 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
No. So
Long
if
distance.
if you actually need to visit your office in BVI or your resident agent, etc., you pull it all off in one day. You're both places. So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
This question is for the gentleman on the right.
Yep.
So if you're an upcoming artist, let's say you're in the music industry, how do you see blockchain helping a young artist come up and fund a project in particular? Thank you.
So, this question was for you, sir. So,
Okay.
yeah, so based on your knowledge of music and movies and the whole industry as a whole, from an entertainment perspective, and then taking what you know about blockchain, what do you see as the future for up-and-coming artists that are emerging to take in resources from the industry and then give those resources back to the investors or the backers or the fans that are backing them? Do you see any technologies in the horizon or platforms that can help emerging artists come up?
Well, I'll let these guys also respond, but generally when you have a new artist who hasn't been exposed, my advice is always to partner up with someone else who may also be in this space and help to promote your new creativity, whatever it is, music or records or anything, maybe even Ali over here, who has a platform, who's set up to promote. He's doing all kinds of marketing, distribution. He's using our movies. He's going to be doing other smaller movies. Are you going to do also music? You're going to get involved in music? You just thought about it, right? So it's, and whenever there's a new artist, it's also try to partner up with someone else who's doing it. That would be my advice. Any of you guys?
Well, I think for the most part, there's a number of platforms out there. One that comes to mind is Royal, Royal.io, which is Justin Blau's new startup. They got $55 million in funding 2 months after they got $16 million in pre-seed funding, and they're basically putting out NFTs of bands, and they're looking at everything from, they got the Chainsmokers to they're looking to launch 120,000 artists. Wow. And they're going to basically just sort of like take, and I think they may have some SEC issues just because they're not doing it as a security and they're launching it with royalties included as part of the NFT. However, I think the reason why they may end up being okay, and their main funder is Andreessen Horowitz, is the amount of royalties they're giving. And I remember thinking when people would come to me with business models and say, I want to do royalties, I said, no, you don't want to deal with ASCAP and BMI. Well, they're not dealing with ASCAP and BMI. They're not doing performance royalties. They're not doing publishing royalties. They're doing streaming royalties. Do you know how small streaming royalties are? I mean, it's like Spotify, right? I mean, unless you're Bad Bunny, you're streaming, even if from like the Chainsmokers is on their homepage right now. I bet you the Chainsmokers' new album might be a couple of $1,000s a year in total royalties off of Spotify. What the artist gets is very small, and of that, they're going to sell 5,000 NFTs for I don't know, like point something ETH each. And it's going to include like lifetime streaming royalties, which